What's the hardest thing about writing? Well, it's getting started. Maybe you're having a hard time coming up with a story idea, or you're stuck on where to take your story next. If you want a way into a story or a way through, I have 9 story starters to help you. This free PDF is full of story seeds and prompts to get you going. To download your 9 story starters, go to nancypanuccio.com/start. That's Nancy with an I, Panuccio with 2 C's, nancypanuccio.com/start. Only you know your vision. And the purpose of getting feedback from anybody is not to fix your story. It's to help you get closer to the vision and intentions you have for your story. Writer Unleashed is for you, a writer who has a story you want to bring onto the page and into the hearts and minds of readers. I'm Nancy Panuccio, writer, editor, and writing coach. And each week, we'll explore techniques, mindsets, and inspiration for writing stories readers can't put down. Thanks for spending some time with me today. Now let's begin. Okay, raise your hand if you've ever received feedback that made you feel like you had no business being a writer, that you had no talent, you should just give it up because you just don't have what it takes. I certainly have. My first graduate workshop was soul crushing. My story was mediocre at best, but I didn't know that at the time. And my workshop leader's feedback shut me down completely. To this day, the only remarks that I remember him making amount to this. The father is an asshole. He was one of the main characters. And he said, this is just lazy writing, meaning there was a lot of summary, there was a lot of weak verbs, things like that. His feedback shut me down completely, and it took me a very long time to recover. And for the next several months, I was straitjacketed by all this fear and worthlessness. I had always been told that my stories were good, and now I was being told the complete opposite. So I started to write cookie cutter stories. I was trying to control the story in a way that I thought readers wanted. So it was truly the deadest stuff I'd ever written because I was playing it safe. Now, if I hadn't been in a graduate program at the time, if I hadn't been duty bound to send my mentor 25 pages of prose every month, I probably would have stopped writing altogether. Luckily, my mentor helped me work through all of this. She helped me energize my writing again and take risks. It took a while, but I've never felt slammed down by feedback since. Not because my work was never criticized again, not because my story was a done deal, but because I shifted my approach to receiving feedback and I stopped feeling victimized by it. So here's what I've learned. There's a difference between constructive and deconstructive feedback. Now, most of us want to hear what's not working in our story as long as it isn't delivered with malicious intent. And some comments are so off base that they're really irrelevant. We can ignore a lot of comments we get, especially in a workshop where there's, 14, 20 people. And it's great to hear good things about our story. Absolutely. That's very important. But flaws in our work in progress are inevitable. They're necessary. And it would be a disservice not to be called out on them. But I think our best readers are like good parents. They don't just criticize and berate us when we screw up. They also catch us being good. Now, sometimes it takes a perceptive and generous reader to catch us being good. Our best readers intuit what our work in progress is striving to become. They help us explore why we're writing the story in the first place, and they open us up to our work's possibilities. They don't just ferret out all the flaws, they help lift our writing up. They help us lift our writing up. But giving constructive feedback is a learned skill, and not all your readers have that skill. They won't be able to help you figure out how to improve your story, or they won't have the techniques to share or even point you in the direction of a story that could provide you an example of how to do what you're trying to do. You want constructive feedback. But the best way to get constructive feedback is to take part in the feedback process. So here are my 5 tips to do that. Number 1, and this is really important, know what story you're telling. You have to be very clear on the story you're writing. Now, often writers become overwhelmed because they're telling too many stories, and it's not clear what the story is actually about. There are stories within the story. There are too many stories competing with each other. So what is your story about? Who's the main character? Whose journey will we follow? What's the problem this character needs to solve? What's the desire or the story goal? The story problem or the character's desire or goal, different ways of saying the same thing, that is the story's compass. Everything leads back to that central problem or desire. Getting clear on that is paramount before you hand it over to your readers, whoever they are. I spend a lot of time with clients getting clear on what their story is about. Because once you know who and what your story is about, that is your story's compass. Everything leads to that central question. Will he or she get it or not? So know what story you're telling. Okay, number 2, become your own best editor. Get a fix on what you already suspect isn't working in your draft before you submit it for feedback. Where is it falling short of your vision for it? What do you want the most help with? Again, you want to clarify your intentions for what you're trying to create. Be objective. Where do you think you're falling short of your intentions? Where do you feel the work is vague, confusing, illogical, or sluggish? Where do you think it's going off track? Putting your own critical eye to your pages makes you an active participant, not just in the critique of the story at hand, but in your development as a writer. It makes you the best arbiter of your work. Because only you know your vision. And the purpose of getting feedback from anybody is not to fix your story. It's to help you get closer to the vision and intentions you have for your story. It also helps you become more selective about whose feedback serves you and your work best. Especially in a group setting, you're likely to get wildly different pieces of feedback. Don't try to implement everybody's advice. Just take what's useful to you. Consider the feedback. Again, it comes down to you knowing what you're striving for, and use the feedback that resonates most for you. You'll know when someone's comments are what you need. You'll be excited. You'll have ideas on how to solve whatever problem that has you stuck. You'll feel energized. You won't feel flattened. So trust your instincts here. 14 people may give you feedback, let's say in a workshop, but only 3 of those might be useful. So be selective. Become your own best editor first and get a fix on what you think isn't working and what you would like more feedback on. Okay, number 3, ask questions. Now, there are 2 types of questions. There are questions you've prepared ahead of time. For example, one of my clients is so prepared every time we meet. He knows exactly what he wants us to tackle during our hour together. He really thinks it through. He really thinks what it is he's trying to do with this story so that our hour together is productive. Now, depending on the format of the feedback, you might have to stay quiet until everyone has given their feedback before you ask questions. That's a typical workshop scenario. And I think this is because often writers will defend their work rather than listen to the feedback and take it all in. Sometimes, though, it's an active, dynamic discussion between the writer and the participants. I've had both types of workshops. They're both valuable. One, you just listen to everyone's feedback, and then everyone opens up the discussion together to go deeper. Or it's just an active, dynamic discussion as the feedback is given. When I'm coaching writers, I prefer a more dynamic discussion because my writers know their story much better than I do. They know what they're trying to achieve with it. They know what they're trying to do. And so our discussion becomes a way to bridge the gap between what they're trying to convey and what's in the text itself. So prepare questions ahead of time that you can ask your readers. The second kind of question you can ask are follow-up questions. Because sometimes articulating feedback in a way that's helpful and even kind takes practice. And sometimes we have to nudge readers to get at the essence of a harsh remark or a vague remark. Years ago, while on a writing workshop in Slovenia, one of my peers told me smugly that he couldn't for the life of him figure out who the audience for my short story was. Now, he'd apparently pondered long and hard about this, but the only audience he'd been able to fathom were middle-aged housewives who listened to Neil Diamond. Okay, so he didn't like my story, fair enough, but I wanted to know why. And his remark about my audience was irrelevant because I wasn't writing to an audience. So it didn't help the story. It didn't help me take it to a different level. Our workshop facilitator, Lori Alberts, knew this feedback wasn't helpful. So she pressed him. After pressing him for something more specific, he realized that what vexed him was that my main character didn't change throughout the course of the story. Now, that was a valid criticism. Useful too, because it opened up a discussion about what my character wanted. Now, I had felt nebulous about her desire while writing the story, and my manuscript reflected that. So getting clear on my character's core desire was a crucial element to charting her change in subsequent revisions. So you don't want to defend your work. You want to listen to what your readers are saying, maybe even take notes. But don't defend it by interrupting the person who's giving you feedback and saying things like, oh, but I mentioned so-and-so 10 pages ago. What do you mean you forgot his purpose in the story or who he was? You want to encourage readers to articulate where and why they have the reaction they do. So you want to listen to what your readers have to say about their reaction to your story. Then ask for concrete suggestions for making your work better. Now, if they haven't taken the time to really think your story through, move on. They're not your trusted readers. They should have thought about it enough to be able to articulate where and why they have the reaction they do. Okay, on to number 4. Keep a beginner's mind. You want to stay open, curious, and eager to write your best work. A beginner's mind is not just for beginners. It applies to the masters too. Paul Auster once said this, each book is a new book. I've never written it before, and I have to teach myself how to write it as I go along. So, no matter how many successful stories or books you write, every time you start something new, you're going to feel like a tenderfoot all over again. You're going to still wrestle with point of view and structure and how to make your characters more layered and interesting, how to keep flashbacks to a minimum, how and when to show rather than tell, and a whole barrage of other flummoxing issues. You'll navigate those issues with more sure-footedness, but you're going to experience the same confusion, frustration, and doubt all over again. That's just part of the process. And with the beginner's mind, you realize there's no there. Mastery isn't an end result. It's an ever-evolving process. And this is the mindset you want to bring with you every time you submit your writing for feedback. You want to stay open to your work's possibilities. And number 5, drop your vanity. Sometimes writers think their story is better than it is. I did. In my first graduate workshop, I thought my story was pretty good, but I hadn't learned enough technique at that point to know that it wasn't very good. So my teacher's caustic delivery about my story's shortcomings really had nothing to do with my reaction to it. That was a separate thing altogether. But more to the point, there was a disconnect between the quality I believed my story had and what actually was playing out on the page. Because if it was good, he would have said that. And secretly, when we offer our work up for feedback, we all want to hear that it's good. We all want to hear that it's a done deal, that the story's brilliant and doesn't need that much work, maybe just a quick polish here and there. So the discrepancy between our own notions about our work and a reader's response can crush us. It can really knock the wind out of our sails. But in my case, had my first graduate workshop been more forgiving, I don't think I would have learned anything. Now, I had been to workshops before, and I didn't get the degree of critique that I got in my graduate workshop. I may not have liked what my workshop leader said. It certainly didn't feel good, but his intentions were good. He was just fighting for my story, a story that was deeply flawed. Now, had I gone into that workshop without my vain preconceptions, I might have handled his criticism with more resilience. Now, by the time I got to my last semester, this has a happy ending. By the time I got to my last semester in grad school, my workshop leader said, you should send this out for publication. He had a few things to tweak where he felt the language fell down a few times, but basically he said it was ready to send out for publication. But I don't think I would have learned anything if my first workshop leader hadn't been as hard on me as he was. Because every story or book starts out as a dim version of what it's going to become. Where your story is right now is not a reflection of what you're capable of creating. Nelson Mandela said it best, you're either winning or learning. There's really no such thing as failure. You're either winning or learning. So don't be afraid to write bad stuff in the beginning. Our early drafts are rarely stellar works of art. It takes re-envisioning and relentless rewriting to transform the raw material in our mind into something elegant and beautiful. It takes time, it takes rigorous practice, and candid feedback from our readers. So 1, know what story you're telling. 2, become your own best editor. 3, ask questions, be prepared. 4, keep a beginner's mind. And 5, drop your vanity. So there you have it. Thanks for hanging out with me today. And if you know any writers who need some support in their writing, please share this episode or the Writer Unleashed podcast in general. And if you love what you're listening to, subscribe on your favorite listening platform and please leave me a review. Reading how this podcast impacts your writing truly lights me up and helps me create topics for the show. Till next time, keep writing, and I'll talk to you soon.